biologist.
Yes, sir.
So I guess, well, maybe it sounds like a dumb question, but exactly what does that mean, or what does that like?
That's not a dumb question at all. After 8.5 years of school, I'm still wondering what it is too.
Yeah.
Pertaining to this meeting, for the last, I think we're up to 25 years. The one paper I had sent you, it's Burn Athen. We call it BAMA, Birth Athen Marksman Association. It's Northeast Philadelphia. I think we have the longest running data set in the nation. It may be up to 30 years now that we had a group of hunters. I think it started in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And we have different guidelines like the paper indicated. We make, I hate to say our bow hunters are better than anyone else, but the fact is they are. We take the cream of the crop. The Burnt Athen is a nonprofit trust. They have approximately 800 acres. In that part of the world, it's a big chunk of woods that they basically had no ground cover. The deer were, geez, I hate to say it, but it was like a concentration camp of deer. We brought hunters in and we brought our weights up. Now they're in line with what we call cultural carrying capacity. There's still too many deer, but they're manageable right now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, after reading that, I was wondering like how, does that apply to our situation in Jamestown? I'm not sure if you're familiar with where we are in Western New York, and we're a city of about 30,000, where we have rural areas all around us, where there's 27 towns in the county, and they hunt in all of them. And the city of Jamestown is within one of the towns where you can't hunt, and so I think the deer have kind of become wise to this, and they are they are in my backyard, the mayor's backyard every night, and they're really becoming a nuisance, and even I think a problem is I'm hearing from people about Lyme's disease more and more, and accidents, and so, but we're just in a difficult situation being in this city, and we're trying to find a way to control the deer population kind of on the outskirts of the city, and different parts of the city on city-owned property in different parks. So yeah, that's our, and Bob Johnson lives in the city, and Bob, I think he could probably tell you more about the city and how it works. And
well, CJ's been here to Jamestown once before.
Okay.
He spoke at Lakewood Baptist Church. I took him down. He visited the archery range that we used to have in the Gateway building. So he's a little bit familiar. And I had an interesting day today. It was warm enough to sit on the porch. So I had my breakfast on the porch and watched 9 deer walk in single file down the sidewalk on Pershing Avenue, heading west to east. At 5 o'clock this afternoon, I had 5, including that doe I mentioned last month that has a broken leg. She with a group of 5 other deer were in our backyard. So I think today I've seen 14 deer.
Yeah, and that's
front yard and the backyard total.
Yeah.
So CJ's got a rough idea because we've been talking, he and I, about our particular situation in Jamestown, and I think it would be good for us tonight to just, for those of you who have questions, pick CJ's brain. CJ, give us some of your ideas and go from there.
Yeah, I basically this.
Can I interrupt, guys, just for a minute?
Sure.
Not to completely disrupt the flow, but I do want to just be cognizant of the state who's on this call.
Okay.
Ryan Rockefeller, who's a wildlife biologist, a big game wildlife biologist with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, has joined us tonight at your all request. And so if you wanted to start with CJ, but I know that Ryan probably has a few other things he probably needs to do tonight as well.
Yeah.
So however you guys want to
Oh,
handle
yeah.
it, I just wanted to introduce him and
Mhm.
make sure
Yeah.
you guys are aware that he's on, and we've now started recording and going through this process.
Is he in one of our windows, or is he on the phone, or?
I'm on the phone. I
Okay.
don't have visual to hook up to here, so sorry
Okay.
about that. Yeah, I think my role here will maybe really just be more to, I mean, it sounds like you've got a great panel of experts here as well with Bob and CJ. So anything I can contribute and add to what they have will be great. But other than that, I'm more than happy to just kind of give you the
Mhm.
angle from the state and how the paperwork might work, sort of speak, in the tags and the from that side of things. But my goal is to try to keep the state out of it as much as possible, I guess, for you guys, so you can be as loose and flexible as possible. So I'll just add in where I think there might be any hiccups, or where I know of a way we can make things work better and more legit, with logistics, I guess. So.
Okay. I think the last time we met, we had some questions that were for you or for the DEC. And, one question I have is regarding bait and shoot.
Okay.
And, is something we can do or should do. And this is something I think that, and you and CJ can maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, we do issue bait and shoots. Well, the formal term for that might be called a deer damage permit, or a DDP, which can come in the form of a bait and shoot. And I probably have a half dozen municipalities in Region 9 in Western New York that actively participate in a bait and shoot every year. Most of those up in Erie County, or actually all of them, Erie County, maybe Southern Niagara. So it's definitely something that is possible and feasible, and it may be something you need to look at least to get things steered in the right direction. I think on our last call, I did mention that a hunting season, I'm always pushing for that. But if you want to get the numbers down quickly to something that's where you hope to have hunters be able to manage that for the long term, you may need to come right out swinging with some type of a bait and shoot program to begin with. If it's determined that the numbers are that so high that you really need them down, now and not in 3 or 4 years. So,
well, now you'll have to forgive me. I'm not a hunter. But here's what I was thinking when it came to this, because one of the things that we really need to do is get other members of the city council on board, and and I think there's some reluctance there, and they're concerned about safety, which is a legitimate concern, and the police chief is concerned about it too. And we talked about bow hunting and how and one of the things that he said to me, that the chief said, that I thought he kind of opened the door for it when he said we've designated some areas around the city, and he said we need to tighten those circles a little bit. And so what to me that means, we've got to make sure that when these deer are when they're shot, when they're whatever with the arrow, how far they can run is a concern of his.
Sure.
And I know some guys are very good, and the deer might just drop, but sometimes they run, and I don't know, 100 yards. And so I was thinking, if you did a bait and shoot, where they're going to be, and how close you are to the whatever we're trying to avoid, whether it's somebody else's property, a road, the school, or so that just came to mind when I was thinking about this. And so it is possible that we
it definitely is possible. That would be possible, as I mentioned, through a deer damage permit, which is really when we start acting outside of the normal realms of hunting per se. So that gives us a whole another list of tools and methods we can use when we go a deer damage permit route. It could be cheaper for you to use volunteers in that scenario. The risk of deer injured deer running 100 yards, it's always there, even further. I mean, they can go a ways if they're not hit just right. To put it into perspective, almost all except one municipality up north in Erie County are using trained law enforcement or other trained volunteers, and they are using firearms exclusively. There's one municipality that uses volunteers and they use crossbows exclusively. But that's not quite that's in part of Clarence, and it's the closed area of Clarence, and it's a little less congested as, say, Amherst or Cheektowaga, Lackawanna, other municipalities that are using a bait and shoot. So, but yeah, that's the major concern. They're trying to draw deer from around the township to these, safer areas where they can, dispatch the deer and recover them without crossing property lines. So, I mean, it's definitely effective. I wouldn't say it's the only way, and it's definitely not the cheapest way. When you start putting bait out in the landscape, it can get expensive too. And depending on who you use for these operations, it could get expensive too if you end up having to go with some type of paid type help. But if you're using volunteers, it could be a little bit easier. But I still push for hunting to supplement at least.
Well, that's one of the things about CJ's paper that I wrote, is this kind of how it seems like the bow hunters and the city, they're working together, which I think is a good thing. I think, and I think that's the one thing we have to really educate the public on in the city of Jamestown. There seems to be, I think, some element of, anti-hunting in the city. Outside the city, it's common. It's pretty well every day. I'm a teacher at a rural school outside the city where I bet 90% of my students hunt, and but living in the city, it's just not a common thing. So, I think, let me see what another question we had last time was about coyotes. Should or could they be, part of this, I don't know, kind of controlling the coyote population too, if that was something we would do? Or
yeah, I mean, there's no real regulation or anything stopping the city of Jamestown from opening up a coyote season. I mean, as far as the state's concerned, coyote season's open from October 1st through the end of March. So, anybody with a valid hunting license could harvest coyotes. It's really just the city ordinances that would be preventing that from happening now. So, there'd be no real action or interaction needed between DEC and the city in regards to harvesting coyotes.
Okay.
I'm interested. You want to shoot coyotes? Why?
Well, I'll tell you what. That was a question that was brought up the last time we had a meeting, and someone mentioned, that's a natural predator of the deer, so we don't want to shoot the coyotes.
Yeah.
And so but then I think I read, maybe it was in your paper and another one that I read, that really the greatest predator to the deer are humans.
Cars.
So we can't shoot the humans, I guess, but but no, it came up in one of the meetings we had, and somebody brought it up, and maybe it was just, like if they came across one, could they,
There was a number of stories of people's pets being attacked.
Mhm.
A
Yeah.
couple of stories.
Yeah.
I think that came up.
The latest data on coyotes, and I'm pretty up with it. Coyotes are not negatively affecting the deer population, basically, say from Pennsylvania up north. In the southeast, it's a completely different story. They are definitely impacting the recruitment rate. From a safety standpoint, have coyotes killed people? Not that I know of. There may be one, very, very rare, but we do know that the coyote that will outcompete the red fox, which you have a lot of. So the red fox population will go down, the coyotes will go up. If you look at the range maps, I mean, as early as the 1970s, a coyote was west of the Mississippi. And that's no longer the case. They're everywhere right now. There's probably more than you know. What you're saying, and basically, whenever we do this urban deer management, there's three main things. One is safety, because it's a different occupation. Like yourself, you have no hunting experience, and what makes hunting, at least from the public, seem that it's very dangerous. I use an analogy of, when you go down to the beach and go swimming in the ocean and all those sharks. Now, again, your chances of being bit by a shark are like 1 in a billion, whatever it is. But the media portrays it as, oh my gosh, it's terrible. But in actuality, it's quite safe on a per capita basis. When you look at safety in relationship to other sports, football, baseball, basketball, hunting accidents, inter and interspecific, we're right up there with pool, shooting billiards.
Okay.
But everyone believes that hunting is dangerous because someone got shot, someone shot someone, what have you. And the perception is that it is dangerous. Not going to be further from the truth. Another thing that comes up to mainly non-hunters is insurance. How can I hunt on someone's property? Is there an insurance? All our hunters have insurance. So in addition to homeowners insurance, which most everybody has, New York State is not one of the frivolous lawsuits. To put an example, if you have a well and it's an open well, it goes down 30 feet, and I am trespassing on your land and I fall down into the well and die, I have to prove to the court that you knew about the well and that it was uncovered. Very, very hard to do. Other states, that's not exactly what happens. The big thing, of course, was Lyme disease, that, less deer, less transmission of Lyme. What we make all our hunters do is we have a donation program. We call it Farmers and Hunters Feeding the Hungry. Ryan, you may not know this, but little old Maryland, we're second, right now, third in the nation on deer donations. We pay for and distribute 60 tons of deer meat a year. It's remarkable. One deer is equivalent to 200 quarter pounders. One deer, 200 quarter pounders. There's many non-hunters that are on the fence, don't know if they want hunting or not, but generally feeding the hungry puts them over on the consumptive side.
Right.
Latest data from Mark Duda, 79% of all Americans do support hunting as long as it does not infer trophy hunting, because the meat's being utilized. What you have from a home range standpoint, and this still blows my mind after all these years, home ranges of deer in the city are just 250, 300 acres. They're so small, where an average deer, say 640 acres, 1 square mile. Deer will obviously move in and out. And what we've done in Philly and Pittsburgh and down in DC, we had bow hunters go in exclusively for the first 3 years, and then they get smart. And then we bring in sharpshooters in addition to our bow hunters. So we've been rather successful. Ryan, I'd be real interested if you haven't got any of those papers. Those, we will blow you away what our archers have done. We actually had a study with Tony DiCanella, White Buffalo,
Yep.
down in Pennsylvania. The township hired Tony with sharpshooters, firearms, and the adjoining township hired us. And we shot just as many deer with our bows as Tony did with firearms
I love
and
to hear
suppressants and everything else. Now,
Yeah.
by year 3, that was completely different. But the first 2 years, and we were about 1/3 of his cost. Another thing that we did in Pennsylvania for baiting, when you look at the data nationwide, when you put bait out, everything, oh, this is easy. They're going to come by and boom, you're going to shoot them. So we did a study in Pennsylvania and we looked at per capita, basically how long does it take a hunter in a tree stand to shoot one deer over bait versus no bait. And it was interesting when you look at the national data, and this is mainly from the southeastern states, most hunters will spend more time in the tree stand over bait than not using bait. The reason, and that's kind of not intuitive, but think about it. If you're a hunter, the deer wise up very, very quickly and go nocturnal on you. So what happens? So what we did for the baiting in Pennsylvania, we would make sure that they would come in and we'd shoot the last one. So the other deer, if there was a group of 5, the first 4 would get relaxed. We'd shoot the last one. We basically, what I made them do, because we had so many deer, I made them shoot 6 antlerless deer before they could shoot a buck. A hunter's role is a manager. I don't care about bucks. I want to control the doe population. If you don't want to be one of our hunters in our group, fine. That's up to you, because we're going to be shooting does. And, you know, we're up every single year, we're shooting 80-85% of all the deer are antlerless in the harvest data. Another neat thing we found in the backyards, for every one that's killed on the road, or we shoot one with an archery, 1-to-1. One road kill, one archery kill. Another neat thing that we found, that we did transects, and Ryan, you may not be up with this, but this was kind of neat. What we found was for every deer we found on the road, there's one more deer that's dead inside the road, say within 100 yards.
Oh, Dad.
1-to-1 ratio.
Mhm.
So what you see in the road, you can double that. Now that could be fine. You know, the township may go with a non-hunting management option. That's fine. Just watch your taxes go up. You know, the deer contraception, yeah, it works. It does, as long as you have an enclosed environment. When you don't have an enclosed environment, it's just not there. What I suspect, probably with the next generation, I thoroughly believe we will have an oral immunocontraception. The deer will eat it and it'll be sterilized. Now, if you think that's kind of rocket science, just think back in the 50s and 60s when guys our age, the doctor said, we're going to give you a pill so your wife doesn't get pregnant. If you were in the 1950s or 60s, you probably would have thought you're nuts. Well, it's standard. We've only had the female contraception for about 60 years. That's it. And right now, with the bad thing about immunocontraception, what happens if it is put out in a bait pile? What about non-target species? They're spending thousands of dollars per animal. I mean, it's just not a viable option whatsoever. Ryan, I'm sure you get this. This is like reinventing the wheel for you, I'm sure, with the DEC.
Yeah, we entertain those conversations, but they usually don't go anywhere very fast. I mean, our stance right now is the only way we authorize any any permits to do any type of sterilization work like that is through a research project that's asking new novel ideas, trying to come up with a better solution. So it's usually backed by university, and there's a lot involved. We do get approached by, some towns and municipalities that they have a real big following of wanting to push this, and some very wealthy people willing to pay whatever it will cost. But even still, we still kind of hold the ground that what's been done so far with what's out there, as far as drugs and methods goes, has proven to not be effective to manage deer without at least some lethal control involved or included. So we don't allow any of the my tongue's getting tied. We do have allowed some ovenectomies to occur to supplement some culls, but we've never just allowed that to go, surgical sterilization. There's what I'm looking for. We've allowed that to occur with some culling, but we've never allowed it without some culling as well, So yeah, I'm right with you on that.
Brian, are you familiar with what they did at Cornell with that type of sterilization? And I believe it cost about $1,200 per deer.
Yeah, and it might have ended up being more in the long term. After they, I don't have any specific numbers or data to give you right now, but yeah, I've had plenty of conversations in regards to that research, and yeah, like I said, I mean, we would entertain another big effort like that if something came up that was a real new drug or something new that was that wanted to be tried, but it's tough to get that. It's involves grants and things like that too. But we're always open to that. I mean, like CJ said, at some point somebody's going to come up with something.
Yeah, Cornell did it at Fire Island in New York, outside of New York City. That's where they did it. And it was $1,200. Are you sure?
Well,
I thought it was over.
I think it was might have been even.
Well, there was some additional money that the college came up with too, but so that's definitely lowballing it. No pun intended. But anyway, what they found is it didn't work. The bucks kept coming back, and it was in one of your papers, CJ, you mentioned the effect on the bucks,
right?
And that is something I had no idea.
The extended rut is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens it's called PZP. And basically, it forms an antigen around the egg. So the does will keep cycling. The bucks will keep breeding them. But once the sperm tries to get into the egg, there's like a barrier, this antigen around the egg. So there will be no fertilization whatsoever. They did it down here in Maryland and Virginia on the wild horses in Assateague and Chincoteague. And what was interesting, and we can identify the horses by their coloration. The stallions literally bred themselves to death, for real.
Yeah.
Because they kept breeding. In that time of the year, the vegetation was very, very bad, low nutrient level, and they just all died out. But again, the horses didn't. They come up and get fed at the parking lot. To do it on deer. And the last I saw a study, the PZP, they got it up to 2 to 3 years where you don't have to capture the deer every single year and give it a booster shot. It was every other year. But again, it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right. Well, I guess, I do want the people of Jamestown to know that, this was considered. I really considered contraceptives or sterilization, and I think we've done the research on that to see that it's just not the best method or the best, most economical method. I've had lots of conversations in the last few weeks with people about bow hunting, and most of them realize, yes, something's got to be done. And they may not like it, but they realize it's necessary. And then, and like you said before, they like the fact that we've said that we would donate, I think half of what they shoot to a food pantry or the soup kitchen or
The Venison Coalition is called in New York State.
the Venison Coalition. Yeah. So, and that makes people, feel, all right, I'm okay with this. I don't know if anyone else has other questions or other things to.
Kind of clarify one thing CJ said that I know was clear in my mind, but I wasn't sure if it was clear in anybody who's not a hunter. On the baiting issue, CJ mentioned that what happens eventually is the deer come into the bait and they start getting shot. They just get smart. So they start becoming nocturnal. In other words, they only come out after dark. And that becomes a losing proposition because you can't hunt after dark, obviously.
Right.
And for Brian, you're still there, I assume, Brian?
Yes. Yep. I'm here.
Yep. We've got a very good situation here when it comes to deer processing. We've got a processor, maybe you know him, Joe Sapiric.
Oh yeah, I know him.
Yeah, well, he can process all the deer and everything that goes to either St. Susan's Food Kitchen here in Jamestown or the New York State Venison Coalition. There's no charge for his work to do that. He's paid by the coalition. So if the hunter wants to keep a portion of the deer, they have to pay for the portion they keep, but the rest that's going to feed the hungry is covered through the Venison Coalition.
Yeah, and I don't know how far it's gone, but I know some of the municipalities up north, I believe there has been a payment system worked out to where the coalition has encouraged municipalities to pitch in a little bit as well, because it's one thing for the hunters to bring the deer in, voluntarily, but when we start, maybe if it's just a hunting program, if there's no culling going on, it might be okay. But some of the municipalities up north, they all of a sudden, like a month, bring in 300 deer and they're all donated. So it gets pricey for a nonprofit like the coalition awfully fast.
Right.
Up north. So the municipalities have kicked in a little bit, I believe.
And that's fair.
Yeah. Not much, but.
CJ mentioned insurance. Where are we standing on this as far as the state's concerned on liability insurance for the hunter? I know we're safe outside the city limits, but what about inside the city limits?
Well, I'm going to defer to the mayor or maybe Jeff. I don't know if you know.
And Brian and CJ.
Mm-hmm.
We have what's called, the actual company is Outdoor Underwriters, and the group generally it's depending on acreage and number of hunters. That's where you come up with. We pay probably on average $50 per member. Each one of our bow hunters, we put in anywhere from depending on which group we're working with, $100 to $150 each bow hunter. We're a nonprofit, so all that dollars goes to one, insurance, and two, processing.
Okay.
Another point that generally comes up at least public hearings is wounding rate. We've done studies through the years on bow and firearm wounding rates. With bow and arrow, it's about 10%. In other words, the animal is hit, it goes off and dies and is not recovered by the hunter. We've also done studies here in Maryland on the efficiency of crossbows versus vertical bows. And again, it was like 8%. One of the same. One was 8, one was 9%. One of the same. Although the media, they're trying to sell crossbows that they're shooting 100 yards. Basically, the effective yards for both weapons is about 40 yards.
Mm-hmm.
CJ, your thoughts? We had discussed limiting the hunters to 20-yard shots.
Yeah, and what I have in the papers that I sent you, that's what we do. When you look at the data, almost all hunters from Pope and Young data, east of Mississippi, 20, 25 yards, and you're shooting from an elevated platform. Uh, we also have all our hunters put their names on their arrows.
Mhm.
So if they shoot, then they can't find it, well, then we could see where they shot. Many times people, non-hunters don't realize the efficiency of a bow. The arrow, don't quote me here, but 9 times out of 10, the arrow will go right through the animal. It'll stick into the ground. So many times what we have, and a lot of hunters hunt in the evening, we make our hunters use Illuminox. Those are lighted arrows so that we can recover our arrows once the animal is shot. Average distance once the animal is shot. We did studies on this in the DC, and they went anywhere on average 50 to 75 yards. Average. Will they go more? You bet. Will they go less? You bet too.
Hi, Ryan. Dan Stone from the City Parks Department. There's 6 municipalities in Region 9 that are using the DDP permits now. They do their
Yeah.
hunts. Is it during regular hunting season?
No, so these damage permits up north, they are run almost exclusively by their law enforcement departments. They are officers that either are assigned or volunteer for the job, and they will go out and they're using rifles at night with infrared imaging and all of that, and dispatching deer over bait piles during. Usually they're trying to go out in the coldest nights when they know there's going to be the fewest windows open and people out and about, and they're dispatching deer then. So it's a lot different than what we're talking here, and I'm not partial to one or the other. I mean, I would much rather see hunters out there doing the work for folks instead of law enforcement. It's been done up there that way a long time. It's worked very well for them. They seem happy with it. They shoot hundreds of deer every year within each municipality. I mean, we're talking 200-300 deer out of some of those a year, and so it's working for them. But it probably doesn't work for everybody, and it probably is probably if they look at their costs, they're paying these officers whatever they're paid. So, and probably overtime. I don't know. I don't get involved in the financials, but so yeah, that's what they're doing. They're going at it pretty extreme, and it's in no way, shape, or form considered hunting whatsoever.
Brian, I had a question. How many tags per hunter?
Well, I guess it depends on how we want to work this. So we can issue deer damage permits to the city, and that could cover hunters coming in and using bows and archery equipment to harvest deer on whatever type of conditions you set on them and in whatever locations. And those would be antlerless only permits, and there would be no limit on how many tags a hunter could receive. The caveat with a deer damage permit is because it's not really treated as a hunting program as much as it is a deer control program. For a municipality, we need to have a formal written deer management plan that would be submitted with the application for the deer damage permit. So it wouldn't have to be anything. I try not to scare folks off with it. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything extremely extravagant, but it should have a little bit of meat to it as far as, so what's the city's current issues with deer? So you'd have to define what your issues are, define what the negative impacts are, and then obviously lay out how you're looking to address those. So either, archers coming in or a bait and shoot with either hired or volunteer help, or, however you're proposing to do it. And then some way to monitor the success of that program. So are you going to monitor road kills? Are you going to monitor deer sightings? Are you going to do some type of vegetative plot surveys on some of your parks to see, is any of the vegetation actually being held to grow now that you've reduced deer numbers? So that's kind of the caveat to a deer damage permit. Excuse me. The other route would be to go through our Deer Management Assistance Program, or DMAP. And what that is a hunting program that really gives a little more, there's less freedom, I guess, as far as placing bait out or hunting after dark or those sorts of things. It's really just a way for us to get more tags to you to then distribute to hunters to use on your properties during the already opened hunting seasons. So, from October 1st through December is when, deer could be hunted in Chautauqua County, essentially. So that would be the way we could go about that as well. So we'd be giving you antlerless tags, and we probably could make it up to 4 per hunter, I guess. And I mean, I think that's the maximum we can really do. So it'd be 4 tags per hunter within the city through that program. But it would, so it's a little more restrictive. Might be a little bit easier to get going on the front end, I guess, is how to describe that.
Would you guys have a preference on doing it during regular hunting season or different times throughout the year?
Who's the question to?
You, Bob. It's Dan
Oh.
Stone.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if you guys would rather do it during hunting season, or would it matter being out of season?
Well, I prefer to do it following the guidelines in the archery laws of the state of New York. But I got another question that I was going to just ask CJ and maybe Brian to jump in on also. When I called CJ to see if he could be with us tonight, we were discussing the whole process. And CJ mentioned if you really want to get a good harvest of deer, it'd be better to start September 1 with permission from the state than to wait later in the archery season. Of course, those of us that hunt understand that once the rut kicks in, that's the breeding season, generally first part of November, last part of October, these deer start to get kind of locked up, bucks with does, and a little bit more nocturnal, and you see less sightings of the deer. So would we want to discuss and hear from CJ and from Brian their thoughts on whether we would be wise to start sooner than October 1?
Yep, Ryan, the reason I said that, deer hunters, so many hunters, they see a doe with 2 fawns and they don't shoot the doe because they're afraid the fawns are going to die. Yeah. Well, deer are functional ruminants basically by 8 weeks of life.
Absolutely.
So they're born, say, on June 1st. By June, July, August, there are functional ruminants. They can fully survive, although they will, in fact, still drink mother's milk. But there's nothing wrong with shooting them earlier in the season. The disadvantage in starting in September 1st is refrigeration after you harvest the deer. It's a little bit more of a hassle for hunters. But you can go straight through till end of January easily. Most hunters don't like hunting in the cold weather, so that's why I suggested earlier in the season. Dan, I want to get back to you. Howard County, Maryland is a very wealthy county here in Maryland. They have Phil Norman, and I can give you his number. He is their wildlife biologist. We hunt either with wounded warriors or bow hunters, and I think they're up to 8 different city parks within Howard County. If you'd like to call him directly, I have his number here that you could talk from a park standpoint. His area code is 410-530-7045. Howard County has been running these hunts Oh boy, I bet you for 20 some years also. And again, absolutely no 100% safety video, the whole 10 yards. They do bait, they do sharpshoot, they do the infrared at night for a census of deer. Again, they're very wealthy county.
Dan, Bob here.
Yep.
A complete answer to you from my standpoint would be, let's do what's going to be best for the city and the residents to reduce the number of deer.
But I figured you'd want to do it when rut was going on, regular season. That's when you're seeing most of them and everything go on. And the parks we talked about are shut down at that time of year as well. Lincoln, Jones and Gifford, Bergman, those kind of areas, Allen Park, that we lock the gates or the cables, and there's really nobody's going to be out there at that time that you're going to be out there is what we're thinking. So,
well, the state of New York also is launching a new season. We added in the week between Christmas and New Year's. It would open December 26th, run for a week for muzzle loader and archery. So the archery could definitely continue on at that time frame as well here in the city if you decide to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I just figured regular deer season would work best. I mean, you guys are in rut as much as the deer are to go out deer hunting. You got everything bought and ready to go, and I just figured the timing would work the best with the parks being closed as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Ryan, CJ, any more thoughts on those along those lines? What dates to hunt?
Yeah, I mean, as far as going earlier or later, I mean, whenever it does make sense during the season is when you're going to have your most hunters active. But I'll say also, you're also going to be competing then with maybe hunters hunting elsewhere on other properties. So sometimes there may be an advantage to giving them an additional opportunity outside of when they're, used to hunting. But yeah, I mean, I could see some of the issues with September just because the parks are open, people are still out. But that would be, I mean, wouldn't be a bad idea. Actually, in our newly released deer plan, on top of that late season, we actually have proposed opening up an antlerless September season in areas that have been deemed or prescribed for, additional reduction in deer numbers, or areas where we haven't been able to achieve the success we wanted through the traditional hunting season. So we are proposing that. I don't know. I think that would be open up to specific municipalities as well that would want to apply and enroll in that. So, I mean, we're thinking along the same lines there too. But yeah, I mean, there is the conflict there possibly within a city like Jamestown.
Yeah,
Ryan,
from a council standpoint.
I interrupted you, Tom. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just saying from a council standpoint, I think waiting till later would be more palatable to the council members who, would rather see, okay, our parks are closed now and there's less likely people out there. And so, I mean, I understand the advantage of September 1 starting, but I don't know that would fly with the council, I guess. Brent Sheldon's on here too. Brent is chairman of the Public Safety Committee on the City Council. So I don't know, Brent, what's your thought on that?
Just the thought that, taking the deer before they get pregnant, before the rut might be a good idea too. Some people might think that's a good thing.
All right. Well,
to put it in perspective from a vegetation standpoint, an average deer, just say a doe, is going to eat a little bit of about 1,800 pounds of dry weight vegetation a year, a little less than a ton. One deer. Bucks, a 200-pound buck is going to be closer to 2 ton. When you start taking deer out earlier in the season, you're saving vegetation. Right now is the most critical time for deer. in the north that go out in the woods. You see anything to eat? They're eating twigs and buds where they can find them. You have no vegetation on the ground. So when I can take them out as early and as quickly as I can, you're saving deer and you're having healthier deer survive the winter.
Yeah, I've tried to preach that to hunters as well. You know, they say, "Oh, you know, I'm passing up the does until I get my buck," and I start explaining that to them or describe it as, "Why don't you go down and go out for 30 days and clip grass cuttings and twigs off and fill a 5-gallon bucket every day, and then dump that all in a pile. That's how much feed you just wasted by waiting to harvest that doe later in the season." So biologically it makes sense, but I do understand the social side of it in this city, wanting to not open that early.
Yeah, but I mean, that's something we'll have to talk about a little bit more.
Well, you know, by keeping the deer active in large numbers, we've got people all over the city that are actually hurting the deer herd and breaking the law. And both Ryan and CJ can jump in on this. And that's just looking at those poor deer in the winter. What do? They go to Agway or wherever and buy 50 pounds of corn and start dumping it in the yard. And I know some people that just flip their their bird baths over and fill them up with corn.
Yeah.
How well do deer digest corn in the winter?
When they haven't had it, not at all.
Exactly. So they'll die of starvation with a full stomach.
Yeah, corn gives carbohydrates, not protein.
Yep.
I mean, the highest protein corn, I think it's like 4%. Deer need a minimum of 12% just to survive.
Okay.
Yep.
Bob, how many hunters are we talking about here? Like, and who are they? Like, you know, I guess what credentials should they have? And
I can answer from my standpoint from the initial conversations that we had, and Dan was a part of this, I have a group of guys that are very interested. 4 of us are hunter safety instructors. 2 of us are master instructors for the state in both firearm safety and archery safety. And 1 is a 2-time world champion archer. So that's the group of 5 or 6 of us that I first mentioned. And Dan mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, that you were going to possibly look at a lottery system within the employees of the city to see how many, and try to match that number, maximum number, like 10 or 12, I think. Mayor, you jump in too if I'm wrong on that figure.
I think you're right, Bob. That's what we were looking at, is 10 to 12 guys. I know a couple guys in my department have been hunting since they were old enough to, and they had interest in it. And we had some other people at different departments in the city as well that would be interested.
Matt Timmerman, you're on this Zoom. You're also interested in taking part in this, I think. And
yep.
I believe I got a call from a Mike Taylor. I'm not sure if he's on here tonight. I don't see him, but he had expressed an interest in this too. But I guess my question is, now, Matt, you're a retired police officer?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess my question is, what are other than the maybe the 5 or 6, Bob, that you have, and Dan, how many do we need, and what kind of qualifications should they have, or what do they need to have as far as a license and that kind of thing? And again, remember, I'm not a hunter, so.
Right. Well, I think they need their archery license and things like that. I mean, DC could, we'd have to abide by the laws of the state, obviously. And I really don't know how many people you'd want. I mean, I looked at your maps, and there might be certain days you'd have to put a calendar on where certain people could go on this day and certain people that day. Develop some sort of system rather than just random. I'm going out for 5 days straight.
Right. Yeah.
We had discussed hunting in pairs, not necessarily sitting together, but two fellas that are close by each other. So if there is a city resident that finds that a hunter is out there and is disgruntled and wants to enter into a debate, that there's somebody there to keep all heads calm and cool and hear everything that's being said. But confrontations with a hunter is simple. The hunter just leaves. Get as much evidence as you can to describe the person and don't get into a conflict, just leave. CJ, Ryan, your thoughts from experience?
Yeah, we have hunt managers. A hunt manager has, just randomly say, 100 acres that we have permission on 9 out of the 10 landowners. And we have Bob on Mondays. He hunts every Monday. Tuesday, someone else. We have stands that we just do it, cell phones, that who's going to hunt this area when, and we hit them hard. The hunt manager, we have, the one paper I sent y'all, each hunter actually has a portfolio and name, address, cell phone number, car make, car description. We have designated parking areas. So even if it's a new hunter, all landowners have all our portfolios so they know who is that guy. If the landowner in that 100 acres still doesn't know who it is, they call the hunt manager. So from a safety standpoint, what was interesting right off the first year, the landowners, again, they're very hesitant. They're on the fence. They don't know if they want to do this or not. From a law enforcement standpoint, we called a bad guy. We're up in a tree stand and a guy was trying to rob the house and we got him. The actual hunters got him. It worked out very positive on our end.
Good.
Your situation, CJ, if I understand you, you're dealing with homeowners that have sizable pieces of property, whereas here in the city, we're talking landowners that have a lot that's basically 50 feet by 100 feet, other than going to the parks. That's why we're in the city parks.
Yeah, we very small. I don't know if they're that small, but 1/4 of an acre for sure. I mean, we watch the people, and I'm sure Ryan will tell you this too. We watch them eat breakfast. They're right outside their bathroom window, their kitchen window, and they hate deer so bad they're willing to pay us to kill deer. Let me repeat that. They're paying us to kill deer. They hate them so bad. So what we do when they want to do that, we take a donation and all those dollars go to farmers and hunters feeding the hungry, and they get a tax deduction for it.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I guess what is our next step? And I don't know, I'm kind of throwing that out to the whole group, but is it to put together a plan for the DEC?
Does either Ryan or CJ have any experience or knowledge to offer us on when you start a campaign of educating the public?
Well, I mean, I think you've already started, right? It's already out there that you formed a deer working group or task force.
Well, and we are live streaming this meeting and recording it, I believe. And so that I know people are listening and are interested. I spoke with a gentleman not long before I got on the meeting, and said, well, we're planning on doing something about the deer. And he said, good, I've heard that. And, so people know what's out there, but it probably we might need to, put something in the paper, regarding just, why we manage deer. I think there needs to be, just a general statement about the purpose of this. And so people, who might have concerns are, I guess, can live with it, and can understand why we're doing this and what the motivation is, and how we're trying to work with the hunting community and to do something that's going to benefit the city. And again, and I've said this before, hunters that I've known, they want to hunt this year and next year and the year after, because I've gotten calls from people say, you can't kill all the deer. I'm like, well, no, that's not what we're trying to do. That's not it. So you're right, absolutely right. It's, it's about education and it's about safety.
You got to present the numbers too, Tom. I mean, we're talking 4 tags for 12 hunters right now.
Yeah.
That's 48 a year. I mean, that's,
right.
That's
right.
not a slaughter on the west side or anything.
Right. Well, and that's one thing I'm thinking, do we need to, I think there were 2 routes that Ryan mentioned. One where it was almost, I don't want to say no limit, but we could get quite a few more. Or do we go the route where it's 4 tags per hunter, and maybe for the first year just start with that, and as it's a little more manageable, a little more doable. I don't know.
I think that was our thought in the initial meeting, was to keep the numbers down a little bit and let it be an introduction year, and make sure everything goes right before we expand it to more people. And then, of course, in expanding it, if you're going to make the circle smaller, you're actually reducing the area of the hunt. So you have to be mindful of how many hunters are going to fit in those smaller areas.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to, I say 4 tags per hunter, but if you're conducting these activities during what's already the open deer hunting seasons, the hunters are going to have, if they're willing to use them, their own hunting tags as well. So, if they're, I don't know who they all are necessarily and what their motives might be, but if they're more than happy to apply for, the regular standard deer management permits for the area that covers Jamestown, then they could get up to possibly 2 more tags on top of the 4 that you would be providing them through the city, and they could use those there as well, along with an archery tag that they get as well with their archery license, along with a late archery tag if they purchase that privilege as well. So I mean, it could be more than 4 per hunter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I usually have 5 for myself.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Do have a question for Ryan as far as education and research. Have any of the other communities that you've worked with done like a deer census before the reduction activities occurred, just to prove that there are an overabundance of deer in the community that they're doing the culling?
Well, to a degree, and a lot of these municipalities and these programs were up and running long before I came on board. So as far as the public outreach and where you guys are at now, that was all done and over with. So I've kind of jumped in easy on those programs. But the thing we stress the most is every acre has a different carrying capacity for how many deer it could support. What we're looking at and what the people are really concerned with, is these negative impacts and or indices, that are indicating what the deer herd, where the deer herd is at and what the carrying capacity is. So a lot of these municipalities are monitoring, like I mentioned before, deer vehicle collisions, or how many, some of them have set up, I believe, maybe not in this region, but ways that they kind of monitor complaints from their residents regarding, deer damage to landscaping and things of that nature. So Lyme disease rates as well. That's a little tougher to really monitor and correlate to deer numbers. But so a lot of them are just looking at what those negative impacts are. And if if they're increasing, they assume that they're not doing a good enough job. If they're leveled off or dropping, they assume they're doing an okay job. But some of them have more rural areas or parks, have done some deer censusing in the past to get a baseline, and it can definitely be done. And there's many different ways of doing it. But when it comes right down to it, you're more concerned about the impacts, I assume.
Yeah, we really don't have many deer car accidents in the city. I mean, the police department said the numbers are very low, at least the ones that are reported. I think Tom said last meeting he had one and never reported it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a little more common, but yeah, I know that, I've lived in this side of town for the last 21 or 2 years, lived over on Bob's side of town the first 10 years, and I didn't see that many deer over on Pershing Avenue. And then moved over here and didn't see that many. And it's in the last 10 years that it's unbelievable, the number. I mean, and there's to me, I don't know, as far as doing a study about the population or a census, I've never had anyone say, oh gosh, there's not too many deer. When you start telling stories, everyone's got a story about the 10 or 12 they just saw this morning or yesterday or the day before, and that's the number one complaint. I have a file of complaints that I've kept over the last 5 years being a councilman, and most of them are, what are you doing about the deer? Why don't you even do something? And so that's my number one issue in my ward, and I know for the other wards it's not the same. And
yeah, I get very few deer complaints in my ward.
Mm-hmm.
More housing complaints.
Yeah, and we get those too.
Bob here again, if I could step in, a question. I already asked CJ this one and he said, oh Lord, so I'm going to ask him again, and Ryan too. I used to know the number, but I can't remember what it is. I've forgotten, old age. So if you started with a buck and a doe in an enclosed area and you had no mortality for 5 years, how many deer would you have 5 years later? And you started with just one buck and one doe. CJ, Ryan, you got any thoughts on that?
Somewhere around 25 or more.
No, it's going to be a couple hundred.
Really?
But we can't answer that, Bob, because we don't know what the recruitment rate is.
Right. When people want to try to do a survey of the deer, it's enough to know that if you don't do something, these things breed prolifically.
Yeah, what Ryan is talking about, I don't care how many deer there are. I don't care. If there's 80 deer per square mile, if there's 100 deer per square mile, there's too many deer. Yep. And what Ryan was talking about is vegetation indices, an index. An index shows trend data. A census counts how many deer. Well, we can't count how many people are in your district right now on who voted.
Right.
You can't do it even with people. It's even harder to do with deer. So biologists looked at indexes, trends. We look at trend data. So again, I really don't care how many deer there are, but when I get 50 roadkill, I get 1,000 Lyme disease cases from the DEC or what have you. It doesn't matter. We have too many deer. We got to do something about it. We can choose the no option, the no hunting option. That's an option. Or you can try to do something about it. I can tell you that just you wait. Once one of the councilmen loses a loved one because a deer runs out and it kills their family member, then that's when it's going to happen. And that's what happens in a lot of these neighborhoods that I work in. They're doctors and lawyers, very wealthy people, and they're sick of them. They're just sick of them.
Yeah, I mean when we were talking about education earlier, and I mean I think I've got a couple charts, and I'm sure CJ and Bob have seen them as well. But literally goes from a buck and a doe, and it shows how many deer with no mortality or anything, how many deer you'd end up with in 5, 6, 7 years. But the other big take home from that is, to not allow that to happen. These animals are set up, they have adapted to withstand 30 to 40% of their population dying every year. So they're going to die one way or another. I mean, these deer are dying one way or another. And in these urban settings, you might not hear about all these deer accidents. And like CJ said, for everyone that's dead on the road, there's one in the brush dead. Well, for every dead deer, there's probably 2 or 3 that bounced off and ran a mile and lived for 2-3 weeks suffering before it finally died. And deer vehicle collisions are the number one cause of mortality for a deer population within an unhunted urban environment, guaranteed. I mean, that and starvation, those are the two ways that these deer are dying. Neither are very great. So if you want to weigh out what's more humane, you've got culling or hunting, which is much more, a lot quicker than getting, maimed by a car and dying a week or 2 later, or just withering away, starving to death because there's too many deer on the landscape to support. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, is there, I guess, I'll need to sit down with Brent and with Jeff and other members of the council, I guess, and we'll start. I mean, we really need to talk about educating the public on it, and we'll have to fine tune this, but I think I want to kind of wrap this up for tonight. CJ, I appreciate your all of your experience and knowledge and information, and Ryan, you too. I was pleased to have you on here tonight. And Bob, I appreciate everything you're doing. So I guess we'll keep talking. I'll let you know if we need to schedule another Zoom at some point. I hope we can meet in person and put together a plan and specific dates. And one thing that I know that I'd like to do in between now and maybe in the next month is I want to walk these sites that we have targeted in the city, and see, like looking at it on a map is one thing, and actually being out there is another. So, and we've got to talk with the police chief and other members of the council and get them on board.
Well, you asked what we do next, Tom, and I think one thing is we've got a plethora of information we've listened to tonight, all of us, and I learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot to begin with, but I also learned a lot tonight. So why don't we focus individually on what we've heard, make our own notes, thoughts, ideas, and go ahead and as soon as you want to plan another get together, like a month from now, and put some of our thoughts together. Maybe by then we can even meet in person.
Yeah. I was looking at the calendar and I was thinking, possibly April. I was looking at April 14th. I don't know if that date's a Wednesday again, second Wednesday in April. I don't know if that works for.
When does the schools take their break for Easter? I don't even know.
That's Easter is the 4th, so that week after that, I believe, is the 5th through the 9th, 10th.
So everybody would be back then.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have a question for Ryan. The other municipalities in New York State, what we've done in Pennsylvania and Maryland, we always have a public hearing. Do you get involved with that, Ryan?
Oh, I definitely can. I'm trying to think back. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now, myself and a colleague of mine from from Albany did come out, and we had wasn't that a public hearing in Jamestown? Do
Yes.
any of you remember that?
Yep. About
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So, I was more listening at that than speaking, but
Was that Jeremy? Jeremy went with you?
no, Susan Booth Binzik was our urban suburban deer biologist that came out with myself. She works closely with Jeremy, or did. She moved to a different position. But yeah, and I've done those for other municipalities as well. More so, it seems like kind of ahead of everything, similar to what we're doing here now. I've done it in the city of Olean. I've went to the city of Lockport, but it's almost before anything's really going. So, but I'd be more than happy to get involved again in something like that. If you get further down the line, and you have a real need for another public hearing to kind of get the message out. Definitely.
Okay. Good. Well, yeah, thank you. We might do that again. I don't know if it's something that is required. Brent, we can talk about that at the council level and see if that's something,
Sure.
And all right. Well, hey, again, I think the mayor, I'm not sure what happened to him, but he's not still on here, is he?
I'm still here.
He's
Yep.
still there. Okay, there he is.
I've been listening intently.
All right. Good. Well, I'm ready to wrap this up. Anybody else has any other questions or any other things to say, or Mr. Mayor?
I just want to thank both Ryan and CJ for being on tonight. It's not often that we get, two biologists to join us on lovely meetings like this. So we really appreciate it. We appreciate the expertise, and there's a great group of folks trying to solve an issue. And I can't wait to see what everyone comes up with. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bob here, one other thought for everybody in the off time here. In the education standpoint, one of the things we really stress and teach, and CJ and Ryan already know about it, look up if you're not familiar with it, the Pittman Robertson Act, and find out where the sportsman's dollars are being used.
Yeah, another good resource, and Ryan, you may not be familiar with this either. Living with white-tailed deer in the backyard. It's put out by the Quality Deer Management Association. Wade Nolan, Bob, helped produce it. It's a great tool, especially for public hearings. It's a video, it's a DVD. It's like 45 minutes long. It goes over basically everything we just discussed, the pros and cons, and lets the township, the council, what have you, decide on their own on what options they want to use.
Good.
I think it's $20 if that.
And that's through QDM.
QDMA, what's called the National Deer Association now.
Oh,
Ryan, if you haven't viewed that, you'd like it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. I'll put a plug in too for the Community Deer Advisor website that's put out by Cornell too. It's probably not quite as hunter oriented, more oriented towards non-hunters, but we refer municipalities to that quite often as well. They've got a lot of even sample, or I think almost like a how to build your management plan tool on there. So, but yeah, I've seen what you're talking about as well, CJ, and that's really, really good.
Well, I want to thank Ryan and CJ, and Tom, I want to thank you too for heading this up.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad we could do it. And I think with that, we're done. Mr. Mayor, you're, I think, the host, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
And I think your dog just said goodnight.
Very much so.
All right.
Well, before we go, is there any way I can get those papers, CJ, that you were referencing? I don't know if I was privy to any of those. I would love to.
I can send those over, Ryan, to you.
Okay.
Tomorrow morning, my staff will send them over.
All right, great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.